Welcome to the Deep Dive Canada, and welcome listeners. We are jumping straight back in time today, and I mean way back, long before the map of North America looked anything like it does now.
We're talking 1500s, 1600s.
Exactly. This deep dive is all about that foundational and frankly brutal journey of New France, the moment French settlers started crossing the Atlantic, and in doing so, changed everything. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack what was driving people out of France, what they faced trying to survive in a really unforgiving environment, and the incredibly complex encounters with Indigenous peoples.
Right.
Encounters that, laid the groundwork for modern French-Canadian culture.
And it's so important for you to realize this isn't just a story of planting flags. Not at all.
Yeah.
This is about two fully formed, sophisticated worlds colliding.
Collision, yeah.
To get how Canada developed, you have to understand that initial period. It was all about cultural friction and, necessary alliances, a relationship of cooperation, conflict, and just sheer resilience. That's what decided who survived.
Okay, let's unpack that crucial point first.
Mhm.
Before we even talk about the French ships, we have to recognize the world they were sailing into.
Yes.
Because, this was not some empty wilderness waiting to be discovered.
Not even close.
The territory that would become Canada was already home to massive, thriving Indigenous nations.
Yeah.
Our sources really emphasize the depth of these civilizations.
Absolutely. From the Micmac on the coast to the Haudenosaunee Confederacy inland.
And the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Inuit up north, the list goes on.
And what's fundamental here is that this was a functioning world.
Mm.
When the French arrived, they were stepping into established territory. These weren't just small, scattered groups.
Right.
They had complex trade networks that stretched for thousands of miles. Way before any European mapped them. They had their own political systems, their own laws, multiple languages.
It's such a huge oversight to think of it as a blank slate.
Mm.
We're talking about nations like the Haudenosaunee, whose political structures, they both impressed and confused the early Europeans.
Oh, sure.
So when the first French ships anchor in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, they aren't facing a void. They're facing sovereign nations who knew their land inside and out.
Exactly. And that context is vital because it flips the whole narrative. The arrival of the French wasn't the start of civilization in North America. It was the start of a massive negotiation and competition for space with people who were already masters of that land.
So given that, and given the, immense risks, why were people in France willing to risk everything in the early 1500s? What pushed them across the Atlantic to a place they heard was just cold and rocky?
Well, the motivation had a few different sides to it. A real push and pull. The push from France was strong. 16th century France was a tough place for a lot of people.
How so?
Cities were overcrowded, religious tensions were boiling over, the wars of religion were just around the corner, and crucially, it was very hard to get ahead. Land was everything. It was the marker of wealth and power, and there just wasn't enough to go around.
So the pull of the New World wasn't just about adventure. It was an economic lifeline. People were leaving ports like St. Malo and Honfleur, driven by this national desire for wealth, but also by their own personal dreams of, making a fortune.
Escaping the rigid social ladder back home.
And you really see this early on with Jacques Cartier, his 1534 voyage. It was officially backed by the king, but the mission wasn't just colonization at first.
No, not at all. Cartier was looking for two things, really. Gold, of course, but the big prize was the Northwest Passage.
A fast route to the rich markets in Asia.
Exactly.
So he gets to the coast near Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and the reports he sends back are, they're really telling. He talks about the rough land, the cold climate.
But he also saw the potential, the huge waterways. He wasn't reporting cities of gold, but he saw resources that could be exploited. And critically, he saw the people who lived there.
Which brings us to a specific detail from the sources that it perfectly highlights how complicated these first meetings were.
The relationship with the Iroquoian peoples.
Yes, around Stadacona, near modern Quebec City. It was tense almost from the get-go. There was trade, sure, metal goods for furs, but there was also deep mistrust.
And Cartier, to sort of cement his claim, he did something pretty infamous. He seized the sons of the local chief, Donnacona.
He kidnapped them and later took Donnacona himself back to France.
Right.
And that detail, it just shows you, these weren't friendly handshakes. These were complex diplomatic events full of power plays, curiosity, and, immediate cultural violation. Cartier wasn't just trading. He was asserting a dangerous claim on territory and on people's lives.
And that set the tone for decades.
So as the 1500s came to a close, The French crown started to realize that, maybe this shortcut to Asia wasn't going to happen.
The focus had to shift.
It shifted dramatically from just exploration and some trading to permanent presence, to claiming and holding territory. And this is where the story gets really intense.
And that shift is absolutely tied to one man, Samuel de Champlain. He's called the father of New France for a reason. He embodied this new commitment.
His big move was founding Quebec City in 1608.
And the location was brilliant. It wasn't random. It sits right at a narrowing of the St. Lawrence River, which gave it a huge defensive advantage and control over all the inland trade routes.
But the sources, they paint such a brutal picture of those first few years. If you're looking for an aha moment, it's realizing that just surviving was a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
We all learned it was hard, but maybe not how hard.
Mm-hmm.
The death toll was just catastrophic.
Oh, absolutely. That first winter, 1608 to 1609, Champlain brought 28 men with him. By spring, only 8 were still alive.
8 out of 28.
Mostly from scurvy and dysentery. They were completely unprepared for how long and how cold the winter was. They didn't have the right clothing, the right heating, and they didn't have the local knowledge.
And the sources are clear on this. Without the indigenous people of that region, the Algonquin, the Montagnais, or Innu, the settlement would have just vanished.
It would have been wiped out.
Their survival came down to adopting indigenous knowledge.
Yeah.
Like using a cedar bark tea called Anita to fight scurvy. It wasn't some European ingenuity that saved them. It was indigenous medicine.
And the ones who did survive that crucible, they became the foundation of French-Canadian identity. The environment forced them to adapt right away. They couldn't just build houses like they did in France.
Or farm the same way.
Exactly. They had to build these sturdy wooden homes with steep roofs to shed the snow. They developed the seigneurial system of farming along the river. The land itself forced the culture to evolve.
Okay, so you have this extreme struggle, disease, isolation, freezing cold, near starvation. The whole New France project honestly should have failed.
It was on a knife's edge for years.
But it didn't. So what held it together? What was the economic engine that justified this massive cost in lives and money?
The answer is one animal, the beaver.
The beaver pelt.
Specifically, the pelt. Back in Europe, felt hats made from beaver fur were the absolute height of fashion. The demand was nearly infinite, and the profits were astronomical. This wasn't just an economic activity. It was the only reason the colonies survived.
Let's break down how that trade actually worked, because this is where the relationship between the French, the land, and the indigenous peoples gets so tangled.
It is. The French couldn't just sit in Quebec City. They had to go deep into the continent.
And this is where we hear about the voyageurs and the coureurs des bois. Can you just clarify the difference between them? Because they're not the same thing.
That's a great point and a key piece of nuance. The voyageurs were the licensed guys, the official freight movers. They were the incredibly tough canoemen who transported goods, tools, cloth, weapons inland to the trading posts.
And then brought the furs back out.
Right. Then you had the coureurs des bois, which literally means runners of the woods. These were the freelancers, the unauthorized, often illegal traders.
So they went around the official system.
Totally. They'd go live with indigenous groups, sometimes integrating right into their societies to get access to the furs and bypass the French monopolies. Their very existence shows you how hard it was for the French government to control this trade.
And this industry immediately created a geopolitical reality. France couldn't get the pelts without local indigenous knowledge and networks.
They were completely dependent.
So they were forced to make these incredibly strong military and economic alliances, especially with the Huron-Wendat and the Algonquin. They controlled the supply routes.
Precisely. And that connection is fundamental. The French military strategy in North America was dictated by the fur trade. By allying with some nations, they automatically became enemies of others,
Primarily the Haudenosaunee Confederacy.
who were allied with the Dutch and later the English. So the French settlements survived not through their own military might, but through these deeply interdependent and often fragile relationships built entirely around the beaver pelt.
So as these settlements finally stabilized, they started to develop this unique identity, something different from France.
Yeah.
If you picture New France in the late 1600s, the communities along the St. Lawrence aren't just tiny outposts anymore.
No, they're functioning, adapted towns.
And the visual is so important for you to get. You see that specific architecture we talked about, those sturdy wooden homes built to handle the snow. You see the long rectangular fields of the seigneurial system all stretching back from the river.
And the church at the center of everything. It wasn't just for religion. It was the social and administrative hub that tied these isolated communities together.
And life was just defined by this adaptation. You'd have bustling markets with local fish and bread, but also furs and imported goods. But the really unique part was the kids growing up there.
Yes.
They were learning French and Catholic tradition, sure, but their farming, their hunting, their vocabulary, their resilience, all of it was being shaped by the land and the knowledge they had to get from their indigenous neighbors.
It was a cultural fusion born out of pure necessity.
So when we wrap this all up, what does this foundation mean for Canada today?
It means that the roots of modern French-Canadian culture, the unique story of Quebec, its distinct place in North America, it's all inseparable from those early struggles.
It's in the DNA.
It is. The historical DNA is one of profound adaptation, resilience against the elements, and this deep, complicated interconnection.
So it's a shared history.
It's a complex, shared history. It involves the ambitions of the French crown, the desperation of the settlers, and the powerful indigenous nations who are all navigating this new reality together. It's a legacy of cooperation, of resourcefulness, but also of conflict that defined a nation.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Dive Canada. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe for more deep dives. See you in the next episode.